In Hoffa's Shadow by Jack Goldsmith. This book was written by Chuckie O'Brien's stepson. Chuckie O'Brien was a friend, a close friend, almost like a son to Jimmy Hoffa. This book is from the perspective of Chuckie O'Brien, who was accused of the murder of Jimmy Hoffa. These two traveled in the same circles. I don't find any of that unusual or why any of that seemed to be a good reason to hold him responsible. They had witnesses that said he did not have the time drive Jimmy Hoffa where he supposedly drove him to his death or disappearance, because there were witnesses who saw him in place A and place B. But they didn't have any leads, and I think what they were doing, and I'm just guessing, is trying to put enough pressure on Chuckie that he would tell them who was responsible. But because of his sense of loyalty, but also fear and self-preservation, he would not say what he knew for years and years and years, and never really. He alluded in the end of his life to Jack Goldsmith, his stepson, that maybe he knew more, but he didn't really know details. He didn't know exactly what happened. What Jack Goldsmith did is tell this story from Chuckie O'Brien's perspective, I believe, as some sort of redemption for his stepfather, when he finally understood on a deep level what a decent and good man he actually was, aside from the fact that he had these mob connections. I don't know to the extent of what Chuckie O'Brien's mob connections were. Certainly he was involved in that whole shady world, etc. He was loyal to Jack. He was the only father figure that he really had that was worth anything. He cared about him, he loved him, he was loyal to his child and Jack's mother for many, many years. Well, not surprisingly, as a young adult, when Jack Goldsmith went to law school, he was ashamed of his stepfather. I think in some ways this is a normal dynamic for any young adult to, at first, in their early adulthood, but what he described is a really dramatic way he expressed by not inviting him to his graduation, by changing his name back to Goldsmith, which was his biological father name, a guy who did absolutely nothing for him, by not speaking to his stepfather for years. He had a lot of guilt about this, and the thing about what was interesting about this was Chuckie O'Brien's reaction to this, how accepting he was. Extremely sad, but never blamed him. Did exactly what a good parent would do. Said, I understand why you feel this way. I hope you change your mind. I mean, it's such a moving story from that perspective. So I believe that Jack wanted to tell the story to redeem his stepfather, even though it made him seem like such a not likable character. And in the beginning of the book, I absolutely hated him, but I believe he actually did this for that reason, to portray his Chuckie, his stepfather, in a better light than he portrayed himself. That was really courageous of him. All the accusations from the FBI, the many times Chuckie was told, do not take a lie detector test. I wouldn't want to take a lie detector test for something I was absolutely innocent, because I don't trust my psyche. Finally did take one on some Maury Povich show or something. It came out that he was telling the truth. But again, so if the test reveals that you're telling the truth, nobody believes it. But if the test reveals that you're lying, for whatever reason, everyone believes it. What was really interesting about Chuckie O'Brien was what an interesting character he actually was. And I think that's the purpose of the book told by Jack Goldsmith. Jack Goldsmith had a very complicated relationship with his stepfather throughout his life. As a child, when he first came into his life, he really loved him. He did things with him that a father should do. Chuckie seemed to really shower him with a lot of love and attention and give him confidence in himself, which laid the foundation for him to go on to have a successful career. He didn't exactly say this, but this is what I'm inferring from the way he told this story, because it really made Chuckie O'Brien look good, and it really did not make him look good from the reader's perspective. In fact, I hated him in the beginning of the book. He just seemed like he was so horrible to Chuckie. But I think the point was he's telling this story from that perspective. All children go through this when they first become adults and young adults. There's a certain disdain for where you came from, and that is normal, so you will break away from your family and become independent. But this situation obviously was very complicated. Jack was becoming a lawyer. He had high ideals, and underlaying his entire life was this shady criminal activity. And yet it was also something, like the Teamsters did a lot for unions. And I think as a young adult though, Jack just did not want to be associated with Chuckie, who seemed low class to him. And he talks about this with a level of shame, and yet still when he describes it, the reader feels angry and upset and disgusted with it. I think that was really brave of him to take that perspective on, to redeem his stepfather. And he does a beautiful job of sharing moments, intimate moments and conversations they had to tell you the kind of person that Chuckie was. Even when Jack did not invite him to his law school graduation, although Chuckie was absolutely crushed, he did not lash out. That's the thing. He writes this kind letter and says, "I'm here, I'm still your father." It makes me just tear up thinking about it. Because what is a father? I mean, this is, I think, the point of the book. He's trying to say this guy was more of a father. No matter what a child does, there's a level of acceptance and loyalty. A good parent will take the responsibility and say, "I understand where you're coming from. When you come back, I'm here." And that's what Chuckie eventually wanted to know the whole story as an adult, as a lawyer. Tell me the whole story. Let me figure this out. And that's why this book was written. But I think really why this book was written, so he could tell you, so he could apologize to the world for rejecting somebody who was such a good parent to him and gave him such a good start in life, even though it was really complicated and filled with a ton of craziness, because nothing is simple and nothing is clear. But in the end, we really don't know where Jimmy Hoffa is. We still don't know what happened. Very much assured, Chuckie O'Brien did not have anything to do with the disappearance of Jimmy Hoffa. That much we feel confidence about. And the fact that Chuckie O'Brien was a fantastic, really complicated, interesting man, that makes you think on a deep level about life, about people, because we always think about things in one dimension, one way. Somebody's good or somebody's bad, but it's always really interesting. You're presented with who's all of those things, who's a good man in spite of being involved with this kind of organization. A lot of what those were, but we can guess that there was some, and that's heinous. All these other people made movies, The Irishman, there were many movies written about him, and nobody gave him any of the proceeds, and he was living a impoverished life. And that really infuriates me. The world now knows who he was. Good job, Jack. And I'm gonna give this book 4.5 stars. I think it was a great book. It was written really well. It was really brave of Jack Goldsmith to write this book from the perspective that he did and take the hit. And I think, oh my God, I just had this realization. That's the lesson. That's the lesson he learned from Chuckie. Wow, I'm having a moment here. He learned that if you love somebody, you take the hit for them. This is what he did in this book.